Hello and welcome to another episode of Fundy Tidings. I'm your host, Jay Remer, and today we're going to be talking about a topic that we don't often talk about, but it's very close to almost everyone that I know. It's particularly close in this case because I'm going to be interviewing my niece. And we are going to be talking about the tragedies around substance abuse, addiction, and suicide, and how it affects us and how we maybe can help you in dealing with some of the issues that you may be having surrounding this issue too, because we know how prevalent it is in all communities. And as you know, this station tries to bring important issues to the forefront so that we can become more aware of the issues and that we can become part of the solution. So I'd like to welcome Munchie Morgan to the show today. Welcome, Munch. It's great to have you here. You certainly get the long distance award, traveling over 500 miles to get here. As some of the viewers know, we had a family tragedy back in April, and since that time, you have been a real spokesperson, and not only for for yourself, but for the community, and for people who are battling with addiction, but especially for those people who are around those people, and how you have come to deal with it and turn a tragedy into a positive. So that's what I want to talk about today with you, is how you have handled this, because I think that you're articulate. On an aside, she's a master crossword puzzle champion. So you're articulate and you're passionate about this. So I guess we could start with sort of the day after the event, or in your first Facebook posting, because I think that Facebook is the social media, the platform that you chose, and so I'll let you speak about how it affected you and how you're moving through this, and how you're handling it.
Well, the tragedy was my younger sister ended up committing suicide after years of drug abuse and addiction and mental illness, and I was always on Facebook. I write about my experiences at work, or just pretty much anything I'm thinking. It's pretty much whatever I think is on there. And the day after she died, I was just really struggling with everything. And I was angry and I was sad. And I've always written as a way, it's therapeutic to me. Mm-hmm. So I kind of just sat down at the computer and I started writing. And I wanted people to know what had happened, because I had seen so many RIP status updates on Facebook from friends or friends of friends or whatever, and it would just be an RIP status, and then people would comment and ask what happened, and then they were just met with silence. There was never an answer, or it was they would make something up, and you knew that whoever had passed away had died as a result of their addiction or a mental illness or something, but nobody wanted to talk about it. And while my sister was alive, it wasn't my story to tell, so I didn't really talk about it. A few people knew, and I still don't know her whole story, but when I sat down to write, I really wanted people to know what had happened and exactly what had happened, and that it can happen to anybody, and it can happen to you, and it can happen to your loved one, and no one is immune to dealing with the aftermath of some sort of addiction. And but I also wanted people that already did know part of her story to remember her as I do, which is, sorry.
It's all right.
Sorry.
It's okay.
I said I wasn't gonna do this. She was one of the strongest, most courageous people I've ever known. I mean, she was 6.5 years younger than me, and she's probably stronger than I'll ever be, physically and mentally. But she was beautiful, and she was loving, and she was caring, and she loved animals. And I wanted everyone to remember her in that way, and not as the addict that she was at the end. And so it was important for me to get out there what happened, but also to let people know that, yeah, she was an addict, and yeah, she had issues, but she was still my sister, and she was still Sarah. And that was basically it. And I posted this status, and I basically kind of did it for myself, but kind of there was just a feeling there that I just wanted people to know. And after that, I posted that, I got, you know, messages and upon messages from friends and friends of friends and acquaintances and strangers literally all over the world, just sharing their stories with me or thanking me for being honest for once, because not everyone is, because there is such a stigma attached to it.
Well, that's it. I think one of the things that you know, that we talked about when we were preparing for this show is the fact that there is a stigma attached to addiction, and it is the time has come. And that's illustrative because of your writing and many other people's writing. But people are ready now to drop the judgment, to drop around addiction and deal with it for what it really is, and to learn to separate the addiction from the person.
It's hard to do.
It's very hard to do, and we weren't brought up that way.
Right.
And so it's important for people to learn to, like there's nobody that I know who isn't affected by someone who has an addiction. And in the community that we live in up here, it's rampant. Right. And substance abuse of all different kinds is prevalent. But nonetheless, even though it is prevalent, it is very isolating, emotionally, mentally, and in some cases physically. And so I think that it's really important for people to feel that they're part of a larger group of people who really want to come to grips with this, because really the problem is that it causes a tremendous amount of stress in us. Right. And we need to learn how to deal with that. Right. And so as you have moved through this, and you've written a lot of wonderful of entries, and it's helped thousands of people to feel that their experience is not a one-off, that it is actually fairly normal, and that there is hope, and that there is a way of separating yourself from the addictive person, but while still loving them, and being open to them. So how did that play out in your own life?
Well, I mean, when I first found out, so growing up, I went to private school, I was sheltered, I never really was around, in my age group, drugs, basically. I mean, pot was a big deal when I was in high school. There was no cocaine or heroin or anything like that I was around. My sister she was 6.5 years younger than me, she lived a completely different life, pretty much. She went to public school, she ran with a completely different group of friends. And I, like a lot of people, heard, you know, when I heard the word heroin or, crack, she was never on crack, but you hear these things and you have these ideas of who uses these drugs. And it's not my sister. It's not your sister or your cousin or your mom or your dad. It's a homeless person, or, you know, somebody that you'd look at on the street and think, oh my God, who is that? They can't, you almost think that they don't even have any family because you don't associate with that. And so when you find out that someone that you love is doing these drugs, it's almost just like you don't want to believe it. I didn't want to believe it. And I couldn't wrap my brain around it because I'd never been on that side of addiction. And so I had my sister sitting there saying, I want to stop, I want to stop. And I sat there saying, well, then stop. What's the problem? And I questioned her strength for the first time in my life. I questioned her strength, and I questioned her integrity. Because in my mind, she's sitting there saying, I want to stop. Well, then just stop. Stop. Just stop. Don't do it. And I turned my back on her because I didn't get it. And I still, to this day, probably don't completely get it. I probably never will because I was never in her shoes. But I did go through that, and I think a lot of people do. And then I actually read these 2 books. There's an author named David Sheff and his son, Nick. And David is the father, and he wrote a book called Beautiful Boy. And it's about dealing with his son's addiction. And then his son wrote his version called Tweak. That's his him dealing with addiction. And I read these books, and it really opened my eyes to just how powerful addiction is. And I finally saw, like, she is trying. She's trying as hard as she can, and this just has her in the grips of it. But the one thing that you need to do is just support them, not support their addiction. There's a difference, and it's hard. But there's a way to say, listen, I love you, I support you, I want to be there for you, I want to get you help. But you also have to be careful about the enabling aspect, and it's a very fine line.
Yeah,
and
you need to protect your own self.
Yeah, because you end up getting consumed by it, because all you want to do is save them. But at the end of the day, there's not really, unless they're ready to get help, and because they have to really, if they're going to go into treatment, they have to want to be there, and they have to want to get the help, because they could go into treatment for a week, 10 days, 30 days, 60 days, and they come out. If they weren't ready for it, they can walk out the next day and pick up a needle or whatever. So, I mean, I did the whole struggle within myself, and at the end of the day, I mean, and it's hard. They're going to lie to you. They're going to steal from you. They're going to cheat. They're going to do whatever. And those actions are not okay, and you don't have to tell them that they're okay. They need to be held accountable, but at the same time, you can still love them. You can love who they are as a person.
Right. So, so the whole concept really is to be able to get to the place where you can have compassion for the person, but they don't have to take over your life. Because you have to have compassion for yourself too, because that's where.
Because otherwise you won't be able to help them.
That's right. And worse, you can't take care of yourself.
Right.
Because if you can't take care of yourself and protect your boundaries, because people will tend to try to abuse that. They'll try to infiltrate or invade your space, or whether it's in your head, or whether it's in your wallet, or whether it's on, in your house. And I think that is probably the biggest struggle that we all have, is to have compassion for the person, allow them to live their life, whether it is something you agree with or not, whether it is self-destructive or not, because as you say, they're not going to change until they're ready to change. But
and it's hard, and I'm not saying that it's an easy thing to be able to walk that line between enabling and supporting the person, because it's hard. It's a loved one, and you don't want to say, you can't stay with me anymore, you've been stealing from me, or you're lying to me. It's not an easy thing to do. And part of you, sometimes you're so angry you just want to say, don't ever get out of here and don't ever talk to me again, which is a totally natural thing if you have someone that is all of a sudden not the person that you love, and you just want to shake them and just say, what are you doing, and why are you doing this? Get out. But at the end of the day, they need to know that if they ever wake up one morning and say, I'm ready, that they can come to you and that you will help them. That doesn't mean taking them in or giving them $50, because God knows what they'll do with it, or but that means that you will help them make the steps to get them into treatment or whatever you can do. And hopefully just knowing, I mean, I've talked to recovering addicts since my sister has passed away that have just said, having one person that you just know in the back of your mind, whether you're going to them that day or the next day or 5 years or 30 days, you know that you have that one person in the back of your mind that's fighting for you, that's fighting the fight with you. It makes all the difference in the world, because you just know that there's someone that still believes in you. No matter what you've done, they still believe in you.
Yeah. Well, I know that in other shows that I've talked about, when I've been talking with Roz Allen who is in charge of the suicide prevention for Charlotte County, we've talked about how little it can take sometimes to change someone from doing something to not doing something.
Right.
And part of that can be making them feel that they matter.
They're worth something.
And that is, I think they get so isolated from these addictions that they just feel so detached. And in many times what we need as humans is to connect with one another. And by reaching out to people who are struggling with addiction, it shows them that somebody cares. And by encouraging them instead of tearing them down, it does give them hope when they're ready to listen to it. And once it's filed away, they will listen to it at some point, hopefully.
Right. And the other thing is that I've found that since I've been writing about it and talking about it and educating myself and trying to educate other people is that I've heard from recovering addicts and stuff that just say how amazing it is, the feeling to have somebody that hasn't been in their shoes, that's trying to understand it instead of just sitting back and judging them, that's trying to get, and I probably, like I said, I probably never will fully understand it because I've never been there, but to have people that are actually trying to understand where they are and where they've been and understand their struggle instead of automatically just saying, I mean, I've heard things like Darwinism at its finest. I've heard things like the most horrific things that people can say about addicts. Like, well, who cares if they die? It doesn't matter. They don't care about their family. No, they do. They care immensely. And I think that at the end of the day, that's why I think my sister killed herself, because she felt like such a burden and she was sick of hurting her family. They do. They know what they're doing. They hate themselves for it. A lot of them. I'm not saying every addict's different, but I'd say the majority of addicts out there, they're not happy with their lives. That's hence the reason that they end up killing themselves or ODing or whatever. It's because they wake up every day, they know they're hurting their family. They don't want to, but they're in the grips of addiction and they can't, sometimes they just can't get out of it.
Well, I think it's interesting to note that people in general are trying to make a shift. I mean, the population is making a shift away from that kind of thing because they realize that in some way there is a modicum, at least, of responsibility for maintaining a healthy community to be able to be helpful to these people. It doesn't mean to be controlling of them or to step in when you're not qualified to deal with these things, but to still be a part of it. And I think that people who go through and cast judgment and have these and believe in these stigmas, there's a humility that's missing. And I think people need to realize that one person, the value of one person's life is no more or less important than the value of anybody else's life. And to diminish someone's stature because they're an addict is it's a very destructive behavior, and I'm encouraged to see that we are trying to make a shift. And I think by people like you, because there are a lot of people who are beginning to voice their opinions about this. I mean, when Robin Williams died, there was a lot that came out. Now, one of the questions that pops up is how the media handles this, and so you've been kind of in the trenches more than I have around this. How have you found the media handling it, and are they being helpful, or do they need some to reconsider their position?
Well, I've seen both sides of it. I mean, our newspaper at home has done amazing things. I mean, they've really been bringing awareness to the addiction problem at home. I mean, there was a whole series about addiction, and they had faces of addiction, and they had addicts, and they shared their stories, and recovering addicts. And they held a forum. They sponsored this forum at this school that we went to, and my husband and I walked in, and it was, I was blown away by how many people were there, and it just shows how many people are affected, and they're ready to do something about it. Instead of sitting at their houses and wondering who's going to fix it, people are finally coming together and trying to find ways to do it. And on the other side of things, I mean, you brought up Robin Williams. There was, I can't remember what reporter it was. I know it was with Fox News, but he called Robin Williams a coward on air and said he obviously didn't care about his family or his kids, and it made me so angry because I'm not going to sit here and say that I haven't had those thoughts of people who kill themselves are I'm not saying that. I have had those thoughts before, that it is a cowardly way out and this and that. And that was before I really got it. I had an uncle commit suicide in high school, and I just remember these thoughts of why would he do that? Does he not care? It was the easy way out. And then when I started learning about the fact that, well, he was bipolar and he was this and he was off his medication, then you start understanding it. But for someone in the media to sit there and say that anyone, whether it's Robin Williams or whether it's Joe Schmo is a coward for killing themselves. You have to be careful of your words, because at the end of the day, I don't sit at home and watch the news and take whatever the anchor says as my gospel, and I don't go around using that whatever they say as my fact. But there are people out there that do, and there are people out there that don't understand mental illness, and they don't understand addiction, and they're taking that word coward, and that's what they're going to run with. And so for someone in that position that is sitting as a news anchor on a national news network and they use those terms, it's completely irresponsible, and it needs to stop. And I know he was called on it. I mean, he made a public apology, but at the end of the day, I think he made an apology because he had to. I don't think that he really gets it. But Robin Williams' family, they don't need to hear that. I mean, he has absolutely no idea what was going through his head. Right. And at the end of the, with my sister, I think she was probably not thinking about how much it was going to hurt us, but thinking she was going to relieve us of her burden, which...
Well, of course, as you say, there really isn't any way to get inside someone else's head, so we never really will know.
Right.
But I think that it is. I think that the media does have a role to play, and responsible reporting with not imparting sort of sugar-coated misinformation. I think tackling the issue head on in a graceful, well, graceful is a tricky word to use, but in a responsible way is I think that's important. And I think that individuals, you hit this at a grassroots level. I mean, you did this for yourself initially, but it helped, as you said, people all around the world.
Well, and it's helped me. Their messages have helped me. I mean, when my sister died, it was 17 days before my wedding day, and I didn't know how I was going to get through it. And from that initial post, I got so many messages from people, strangers, just sharing their stories with me. And every message broke my heart all over again, because knowing that someone else had gone through it. And it was, I mean, hundreds and hundreds of messages of these people that had either gone through it themselves or their loved one. And I got a message from a stranger who had lost her sister in the same way 4 days before her wedding. And she got through it. And I'm not going to say that alone, but that, to me, could look at it and say, someone was where I am right now in this exact same predicament, basically. And she did it. She walked down the aisle, and her family was happy for her, and she was able to do it, and she's got through to the other side. And that was amazing for me. And the fact that this stranger took time out of their day to send me a message to thank me and to let me know you can do this, it was huge. And so that's what kept me going, kind of. When I wrote the initial post, that could have been it. But the response that I got from people, it just made me want to keep learning about it so that I can talk about it.
Yeah. So you've gone actually to groups for sort of Addictions Anonymous, or whatever they call these groups. And do you encourage other people to attend those groups?
Oh, yeah. And there's a group called Attack Addiction that was started by a couple who lost their son to an overdose in 2012, right before Christmas. And they started this group called Attack Addiction. It's only been around for a couple years, and they've already done, amazing things. They've had a walk. They raised, I don't even know how much money, but they've been working on legislation. They've gotten so many things done, and they have I think 2 other couples on the board with them that also lost their children. And a bunch of people suggested I reach out to them after Sarah died, and they're amazing. I mean, it's not anonymous. It's meetings once a month, and there's anyone from addicts to recovering addicts to loved ones to people who have lost someone, and it's just an amazing thing. And we went there to the first meeting. My husband came with me, and we were just going to sit in the planning thing, and the guy that was at the table with us, we started talking. He was asking us why we were there, and I brought up Sarah, and he's like, "You just lost her in April." I said, "Yeah." He goes, "There's a support group that we do back there." I said, "Yeah, that's fine," because I didn't think that I really needed it. And we kept talking, and he's like, "You might want to just go back there." And to sit in a room with people that have been there in one way or another. There was addicts in there was recovering addicts, it's just, I walked out of there, you just don't realize how much you need to talk to people who get it without having to explain yourself.
Right.
And you walk out of there, and it was just like, I felt like I had a 10-pound weight off my chest. And now it's the people I've met there are some of the most amazing people, and they're doing amazing things. But at the end of the day, you could reach out to any one of them at any hour of the day, and they'll just get it. I'm so angry right now, or I'm so sad, or I feel like I can't get out of bed, or I feel like I can't do this, or I just feel discouraged because I just saw that someone else died, and I don't know why are we doing this? Like,
yeah.
And there's somebody there to tell you to keep going.
Well, I think, as we said earlier, making a connection with someone else when you're in a state of crisis like that is really, really important. So if there was one piece of advice that you could give our listeners or our viewers who are in the same shoes that you were in, or are dealing with loved ones who are in a crisis themselves, what do you think would be one piece of advice that would be a good takeaway?
I would say do some research and find there are resources, there are meetings, there are people in every community that are going through this. And these days, they're a lot more open to talking about it. And if you can even find one person, friend me on Facebook, I'll talk to you. I mean, seriously, it's like if you can find one person that you can talk to, because at the end of the day, everyone talks about how hard the addict fights, but at the end of the day, the family members and the friends that love that addict are fighting their own fight, and it's hard. And if you need to take care of yourself too, and you need to have a support system for yourself so that you can help your loved one.
Right.
So that would be my number one thing, whether it's counseling, whether it's going to talk to someone, or whether you're able to find somebody or a meeting or even one person that gets it. It just makes it that much easier to bounce feelings and thoughts and everything off of.
Well, it's real. I really thank you very much for sharing these thoughts, because it's really, as I said, people do feel so isolated, and to actually hear someone who's been through it and is handling it, and as a result helps other people. And I think that would happen with anyone who really can find the resources to help themselves, so that they can relieve the stress that they're feeling themselves, can help other people.
Oh yeah, it makes you just want to, once you start actually learning about it and talking to other people that have been there, it makes you just want to. I mean, even my husband, even Wes, when he came to the forum with me, he's like, I want to learn more. Like, I want to help people. I want to get information out.
Well, that's good.
So, yeah.
Well, thanks, Munch, for coming on.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us. And I hope to see you again on another episode of Fundy Tidings.